So we can't completely reverse the signs of aging, but we do see the microbiome can slightly shift some of these changes in immunity.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Laurie Cox.
So we're really interested in this interaction between the gut microbiome, metabolism, and brain health.
What we feed our gut could influence so many things, our mental health, our immunology, but could also prevent diseases of the brain in the future. Do you feel like you're just like at the tip of the iceberg of understanding?
It's really what I think about as turning a gut feeling into precision medicine. Parkinson's disease,
Multiple sclerosis,
Lewy body dementia, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease. Turns out the microbiome can regulate that, and maybe the secret lies in the gut.
This show is sponsored by United Health Group. We know women live longer than men, but did you know they spend 25% more of their lives in poor health? How can that be? Well, it's that women's care is often treated as isolated moments instead of a lifelong experience. That's why United Health Group is working to reshape women's health with a more connected approach to care, supporting women through every stage of life, from adolescence to menopause and every moment in between. This year, United Health Group was the first to expand coverage for doula care nationwide, helping more women access personalized support before, during, and after birth. And through community partnerships and in-home care, United Health Group is helping women with the greatest needs detect and prevent diseases like cancer and heart disease earlier. Because women's health is more than any single diagnosis or moment in time. It's about care that follows women throughout their lives.
I am really excited about the topic of today's podcast because I have been long obsessed with the idea that food is fuel, that food is medicine. And it has a lot to do with the gut-brain connection. Some call it the gut-brain axis. And so I wanted to share with you someone I met recently who I think is absolutely brilliant on this topic. Her name is Dr. Laurie Cox, and she studies the gut microbiome at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and also at Harvard. So she's a Harvard scientist for all of us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Norah, for having me here today. I'm really excited to talk all about the gut microbiome today and brain health.
So just to start us off, for those not familiar, what is the gut microbiome?
So the gut microbiome is the trillions of microbial cells that live in our guts. We used to think about microbes and bacteria as being bad, but as it turns out, the gut microbiome is a community of microbes that supports our health. They make vitamins for us, they educate our immune system, and they can even protect us from pathogens, so protect us from getting other infections. And just recently, we've been learning that the gut microbiome can even affect the brain, really by changing the immune system, by changing metabolism.
Because you work in the Department of Neurology, and yet you're an expert on the gut microbiome.
Yeah, that's right. So originally I trained as a microbiologist, but I just got so fascinated in the gut-brain axis, as you say. And so I sought further training and really try to work across the aisle with neuroscientists and microbiologists alike.
So I just alluded to it, but what is this superhighway that exists between the gut and the brain?
Yeah, so the gut microbiome can affect the brain in a couple of different ways, and it also is a two-way street. So first, we know the gut microbiome can affect the brain by secreting many different molecules or metabolites. So for example, the gut microbiome can even secrete neurotransmitters. Now, there's a big debate, do these neurotransmitters in the gut actually get into the brain? But studies in mice and also clinical studies in humans have found a connection between microbial neurotransmitters and depression and depressive-like symptoms.
What's an example of a neurotransmitter?
So GABA. GABA is something that we know is made by the gut microbiota. And so, for example, when they gave a probiotic that produced GABA to mice, and then they test for depression by seeing how long they would swim before they would give up. The mice that got the GABA-producing lactobacillus or probiotics swim much longer. And so we can actually see by changing the gut microbiome, we can change resilience and behavior.
What you're suggesting is that our gut microbiome affects our mental health among many other things.
Yes, absolutely. And so we think this is happening through neurotransmitters, but also through inflammation. So we know that many things related to mental health, if you have too much inflammation, that can also have a negative impact. And we know microbes have a really profound effect on the immune system.
We're going to dive deeper into this, but I'm sure people that have just been listening are like, oh my gosh, I need to know more. The idea that what we feed ourselves, what we feed our gut, could influence so many things, not only our mental health, our immunology, but could also prevent diseases of the brain in the future. But so first, what do we feed our gut or our microbiome that makes it happy, essentially?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And if you want to think about your microbiome as a community of 1 trillion cells that support you, you should also try to support your gut microbiome. So a lot of the things come down to fiber, right? And so microbes need carbs just like we need carbs. And if you eat simple carbohydrates or very processed foods, you basically can pull out all those nutrients in the small intestine. And your microbes in the large intestine get carb starved. And they're pretty unhappy when that happens. And so when you eat things like fiber, you eat your vegetables, eat the complex carbohydrates, it gets down to the lower gut, and your microbes ferment that. They ferment that into things called short-chain fatty acids. One of those is called butyrate. Turns out the cells in your gut get about 60% of their energy from microbial butyrate. And if you aren't feeding your microbes carbs, your gut lining is going to start to leak and have gaps in it. The other big thing that happens when you feed it fiber and they make these short-chain fatty acids, they also talk to cells that make hormones in your gut, digestive hormones. And those will make something called peptide YY that goes to the brain and tells you that you're full. So as it turns out, your gut microbiome can give you a second satiety signal. And if your microbes are hungry, you might be more hungry too.
There's such a craze when it comes to peptides. A GLP-1, which is an Ozempic, Wegovy, all of those are peptides. But I think what you just said to me is there are natural ways to give your brain satiety, as you said, which means the feeling that you are full. And that is through fiber foods. What would be, just for example, because I think still many people don't know, what does that mean, fiber? What would be example of foods that we eat that our gut, all the little microbes and bacteria in our gut say, yay, I'm so happy, give me more.
So these are things like very fibrous vegetables. You can think about Brussels sprouts, eat your broccoli, have cauliflower. Lots of vegetables are great. You can also have other things like chia seeds, flax seeds, and then inulin is a supplement that we see sometimes. It's in chicory root, so if you drink those chicory root coffees, that's something there. But you can also get fiber supplements that have all of these things that support a healthy microbiome.
Mm-hmm. What happens to our microbiome as we age?
Mm-hmm. So I think this is a really important question. Our microbiome is really stable throughout early adulthood and midlife, and that's because we have a really good, robust immune system. But as we age and we're thinking about, from 60 to 80 or even beyond, our immune system can sometimes become dysregulated, and so does the microbiome. And there's this really sort of vicious cycle. So without this control from the immune system, sometimes we have an overabundance of microbes. Instead of them of the community being balanced, you might have a real overabundance of one particular microbe, and that might throw the whole function off.
And then what happens when the whole function is off in the gut microbiome? Does that then lead to inflammation that then leads to disease?
Yeah, and so there was a really beautiful study where they looked again in experimental animal models in mice, right? And so they took microbes from a really old mouse or a young mouse, and they swapped them. And when you change the microbes, you change two things. One is called inflammaging, so inflammation and aging, and the other is called immunosenescence. It's basically when the immune system doesn't work so well. So their immune cells were secreting all of these signals to say, hey, there's something wrong, let's go attack it. But the cells that were supposed to go fight off of a bacteria weren't able to fight that bacteria. So dual inflammaging and immunosenescence. So they swapped the microbes and they got partial repair. So in this study, the best thing that you could have been is a young mouse with a young microbiome. Next, it was a young mouse with an old microbiome. Next, it was an old mouse with a young microbiome. And worst was old mouse, old microbiome. So we can't completely reverse the signs of aging, but we do see the microbiome can slightly shift some of these changes in immunity.
And those types of studies, in terms of the work that you're doing every day, in real terms, what does that mean in terms of like, well, a lot of us have family members who are dealing with the diseases of aging. Maybe it's dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Does that mean that maybe some of the prevention or the solutions could be found in the gut?
So that's our hope. Our hope is to really be able to look at people in a personalized and functional way and say what microbes are changing and what functions are changing. So one of the things that we see across these diseases is a dropout in particular classes of microbes, these butyrate-producing microbes, the microbes that sort of fortify our gut. And our hope is if we can identify the people who are losing these butyrate producers, could we give them back and could we restore some of the beneficial immune functions?
I think that's what's so exciting about what you're doing and what other scientists are doing in terms of looking for these potential cures, because these are difficult diseases that we deal with, as we say, as we age. Speaking about aging, how much do our hormones influence our gut?
Yeah, so this is also really important and interesting area to study. And so we know that there's this two-way interaction between gut microbes and hormones. So if you change your hormones, you can change the gut microbiome, but vice versa. Your microbes can also regulate how much hormones you have in your system. And so this is just sort of anecdotal evidence. We know that women who are on oral contraceptives, if they go on high-dose antibiotics, the pill might not work. And that's because the gut microbes can actually regulate how much hormone is being taken up in your system. Similarly,
so I'm going to stop you right there, because it's my understanding that 80% of women will at some point in their life use an oral birth control pill, whether for birth control, hormone regulation, PCOS, multiple types of things that people use birth control for, other than birth control, I should say. So say that again, because I can remember hearing this myself as a young woman that, wait, what about my birth control and antibiotics?
Yeah, so a doctor will often say if you go on high-dose antibiotics and you're on the pill, that you might want to think it might not be as effective. And that's because microbes really trigger this uptake of hormones in our system.
And an antibiotic is wiping out some of those microbes, the good and the bad bacteria.
Yep.
And so as a result, that affects the hormone uptake that would have prevented pregnancy.
Exactly. And so this comes into play also with microbe diet interactions. So we know that diet is a really big shaping factor of the gut microbiome. And women on a high-fat diet oftentimes have a microbiome that triggers a higher level of estrogen uptake. And so then there can be higher levels of estrogen, and that could play into risk factors later on for estrogen-driven cancers. And so this is a brand new area of study, and the term has been coined the estrobolome. So we have the microbiome and estrogen coming together as the estrobolome. And we really want to understand how these different pathways interact, and that might be really important influences for women's health and cancer.
I find all of this so fascinating. I really do, because the human body is incredible. And the idea, too, is I've always thought about food as medicine, because it influences everything that's going on in our gut that then sends out all of these signals, including hormone regulation and influences inflammation. To me, unlocks so many secrets. And you're just, I think, how do you feel like your field is? Do you feel like you're just like at the tip of the iceberg of understanding, or do you feel like you know a lot?
I feel like the pathways are there, but we're really at the tip of the iceberg. And so then thinking about inflammation in the next stage of life, I think an area that really needs a lot more research is menopause, the microbiome, and how that affects, lifelong health in many compartments. And so we just did a study in an animal model of Parkinson's disease and aging. And what we found was that the female mice were relatively protected in midlife. They didn't get a lot of signs and symptoms, and they didn't have a lot of inflammation, but the males were affected and they had inflammation. But after late stage aging, when their estrogen levels dropped, the females got inflammation and they got the signs of Parkinson's in this animal model. That was really linked to this, again, drop in estrogen and a change in inflammation. And so we know there's a lot of connections there. Could we then use the microbiome to then reverse some of those inflammation signs to protect women's brain health post-menopause?
Because if you're looking for answers, women get dementia at higher rates than men. women get Alzheimer's at higher rates than men? Do women get Parkinson's too at higher rates than men?
So men actually have higher levels of Parkinson's disease, but then there's Lewy body dementia that affects a large number of women. And so it's all areas that are really important to focus on. And for example, while more men get Parkinson's disease, still a large number of women get it as well.
And multiple sclerosis, women get more, present with multiple sclerosis more than men, correct?
Exactly. So that's another autoimmune neurologic disease. We know women have more autoimmunity, and about 3 times more women get MS than men.
Mm-hmm. And so just to draw that connection about, because I think so many women who have entered menopause or in menopause say, wow, I'm just learning how much my body changes. And as Dr. Rachel Rubin, who does a lot of work in terms of hormone replacement therapy, she's described what happens to a woman in menopause. She calls it a castration of your hormones. And so when you talk about this steep drop-off of estrogen, because a woman is no longer producing eggs for reproduction, what does that do to the microbiome? It sounds like it's devastating.
So I think that it can be, and I think it's very individualized, right? And so not all women experience the same menopause symptoms. Some have a lot of sleep disruptions and hot flashes. Some get menopause at different ages. And there's been a link between early menopause and a heightened risk for Alzheimer's disease. So understanding when it happens, how it happens, I think is really important. And the microbiome, because it's so central to affecting both our hormones and our immune system, the microbiome might be influencing what path women take through menopause.
Absolutely fascinating. And I imagine, and I know this is not, you can say whether you want to opine on this or not, but I think this is why so many doctors who are in the perimenopause and menopause space recommend hormone replacement therapy, not only for just to help with symptoms, but because they believe that the lack of estrogen not only leads to massive bone loss, muscle loss, but could be a cause in some of these neurological diseases that present in larger numbers in women than men. Am I saying that right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And the thinking is that early intervention is key. So if you have this sort of gap, or there have been studies where they tried to apply estrogen much later in aging and there was maybe detrimental effects, the idea is that early intervention is important. So prevent the damage from occurring, prevent the inflammation, prevent the toxic proteins building up in the brain. And that prevention strategy and early intervention is so important.
And doctor, you talked about that the gut and the microbiome loves, and it's okay to use those interchangeably, right?
Yeah,
okay, good.
yeah.
Yes. You talked about, doctor, how the gut and the microbiome love fiber, but there are some other foods that the gut likes, right? Like what about polyphenols?
Exactly. So polyphenols are a fantastic example. So polyphenols, they're in those bitter foods. So they're in cranberries. They're also in, I like to
blueberries. I eat blueberries every single day.
Exactly. And I also like to think about cultural uses of polyphenols. So some of those really bitter digestives that people used to have after their meals, those also are rich in polyphenols.
Like an Aperol?
Yeah, exactly. So,
some of the young women on my team are cheering right now. They love them some Aperol spritzes.
So we think about how have these things been incorporated into our culture? Why are these bitter foods really important to us? And these polyphenols will boost good microbes and suppress bad microbes. And so one of this sort of next generation probiotics out there is called Akkermansia. I know it's a funny name. It's named after a Dutch microbiologist, Akkermans. So Akkermansia, if in case that helps anybody. But that seems to be an emerging probiotic, and polyphenols will boost Akkermansia.
And what are some other polyphenols? I should know this off the top of my head, but in addition to cranberries, blueberries, which I love, dark chocolate is one.
So some studies have looked at camu, which is a fruit from Brazil, and you can also get it as a dietary supplement as a powder. And there have been studies specifically looking at this camu polyphenol powder and how it can boost Akkermansia and help with metabolic responses and also responses, anti-tumor responses as well.
Is turmeric a polyphenol?
Oh, that's a good, I would actually have to look that up.
Yeah, I know. I need to look that up. That's something I eat almost every day as well. But in terms of, I don't eat a lot of dark chocolate, but cocoa is essentially the main element in dark chocolate. And I make a lot of smoothies with cocoa powder
That's
in
perfect.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. In addition to my blueberries, so that my gut microbiome is, and it's the acromantia, hopefully is populating in great numbers.
Exactly. And very happy, I'm sure.
Could you study that? Like, can you today, could you do a sample of my gut microbiome and like tell me whether whether it's happy, I guess, is the best way to put it, or healthy, or?
Yeah, and so we could definitely study your gut microbiome, and I'd love to do that. And so one of the things that we could do is we can sequence it, which is taking names. We can do what's called shotgun metagenomic sequencing, which is taking functions. So not just asking who's there, but do you have a microbe that's there? And is your microbiome making vitamin B12 for you, for example? So understanding functional level is important. And then finally, we can do metabolomics, which is saying, well, what are all the chemicals that your microbiome is making? Are they making antioxidants? For example, some studies have connected Akkermansia making S-adenosyl methionine, this powerful antioxidant, and that's linked to some of the beneficial effects in neurologic diseases. So there are ways to look at the microbiome, but really getting at the function is what's really important.
So we just Googled this, and yes, I think I was right that turmeric is in fact a polyphenol. It has the ingredient curcumin in it, which is, I take it because it's anti-inflammatory. I actually buy the actual root. I shave it, put it in my NutriBullet with water, and then I make ice cubes. And then so I just have a bunch of ice cubes in a Ziploc bag, and then I put that in my smoothie in the morning with my blueberries and cocoa powder. And
well, that sounds delicious. And I think that's a great way to support gut health and to have it right on hand. And I think that goes back to us thinking about what are longstanding cultural practices for health. And many of these things are rooted in the gut microbiome. So it's really no surprise that a lot of these spices that are thought to be really health promoting have a profound effect on the gut microbiome.
do we know anything about that? Because a lot of these have been used in Southeastern culture or in Asian culture, or South Asian culture, I should say, or Asian culture for a long time.
Yeah, so we're just starting to learn about these things. It's really with this advent of new technologies like metabolomics. So first we got DNA sequencing, and we could look at all the genes in the human genome. Then we did high throughput sequencing, and we could look at all the bugs in our gut and ask who's there. Now we're getting into metabolomics, and we can ask, what do they make? And so now when we do these dietary intervention studies with the spices, we can look at what are the compounds they're making and what's really most linked with beneficial outcomes in a very precise way.
This show is sponsored by United Health Group. We know women live longer than men, but did you know they spend 25% more of their lives in poor health? How can that be? Well, it's that women's care is often treated as isolated moments instead of a lifelong experience. That's why United Health Group is working to reshape women's health with a more connected approach to care, supporting women through every stage of life, from adolescence to menopause and every moment in between. This year, United Health Group was the first to expand coverage for doula care nationwide, helping more women access personalized support before, during, and after birth. And through community partnerships and in-home care, United Health Group is helping women with the greatest needs detect and prevent diseases like cancer and heart disease earlier. Because women's health is more than any single diagnosis or moment in time. It's about care that follows women throughout their lives.
I want to talk about you, Dr. Laurie Cox, because people have been listening and think, oh my gosh, I have just learned so much in such a short period of time, which is what we want to do on this podcast. But how did you get into microbiology?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking about that. You know, I always jokingly say I was brainwashed into it. So both my parents are both scientists, and my dad was a microbiologist and started a family company. And so starting at the age of 5, I started going into the company and riding a scooter around the machine shop and the lab. And by the time I was 14 years old, I was working summers doing quality control, growing all these different anaerobic bacteria. And they also had a really big commitment to teaching. And so I got to sit in all these teaching classes and interact with scientists from really around the world and start to understand how fun microbiology is when I was just a kid and a teenager.
And now it's your life's work.
It really is. Now it's like a kid in a candy shop. I love what I do.
And so in your lifetime, how big have the advances been? And what's the most exciting thing do you think that's happening right now in microbiology or in the study of the gut microbiome?
I think our ability to see. And that is really driven by technology. So when I was starting my PhD, the NIH put out the Human Microbiome Program that said, we don't know how to sequence it. We don't know the best way to sequence it. And we don't even have all of the bugs out there. We don't even know what to call them. And during my PhD, when I would go, try to hunt for microbes and culture microbes from a sample, 1 out of 50 bacteria I isolated was brand new. And I actually got to name 2 new bacteria just because it was it's like you reach into a pond and you come up with a whole new microbe.
I hope you named them after yourself.
Well, you're not allowed to do that anymore, but I did name one after New York.
Okay.
So Dubosiella newyorkensis, because it was discovered at NYU.
What about that acromantia? Is that after a guy?
You're allowed to name it after people, but not yourself.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So they did change that rule. And so the fact, when I was starting my PhD, the sequencing technology that I use every day now wasn't invented. It was invented during the time of my PhD.
Wow.
So when I started to when I finished, 5.5 years later, a whole new machine had been invented.
And so what will being able to sequence those bacteria, or am I saying that right?
Yeah, bacteria, microbiome, all the same.
What will be able to sequence all of that mean in terms of disease prevention?
Yeah, so we have to know who's there, right? So people, it's really what I think about as turning a gut feeling into precision medicine. So we say, I want to change my microbiome. Well, first I want to know, what do you want to change about it? Show me what's there. And so first we have DNA sequencing, but the new advances that are happening today are now getting into metabolomics. And then that's getting closer to be saying like, oh, well, for example, the microbiome can affect vitamin B levels. So we can see, are you low in vitamin B? Could it be from your microbiome? Maybe we give you some more vitamin B and that helps your health. And so that really gets us, again, into targeted patient-specific precision medicine.
And just remind everybody, Doctor, why maybe a low vitamin B level would not be advantageous for your health.
Yeah, so vitamin B, it does so much stuff. So it tunes the immune system. It supports brain health. And it's been linked to many different neurologic diseases. So there are altered and depleted vitamin B levels in Alzheimer's disease and MS. So we're thinking that giving this back could be really helpful.
Wow. I feel like that kind of like the key just went into the keyhole, like for me, and unlocked the door when you said that, because it's like now you know why maybe vitamin B levels aren't high enough, and then low vitamin B levels are linked to these neurologic diseases.
Yeah, and so that's, again, we're trying to say not just how can I have a generic healthy microbiome, but what is your microbiome lacking? What is it producing? And so how can we keep everything in balance that way?
Incredible. And I think, Dr. Cox, too, what's so interesting is you are a new mom. How old is your daughter?
She's 9 months old.
9 months. What did you learn about pregnancy and now breastfeeding, and how did you keep a healthy microbiome?
Yeah, I love that question. I think a lot about infant microbiome, mom's microbiome. So one of the great studies, this was from Ruth Lay, she looked at the gut microbiome and how it changes during pregnancy. And the mom's microbiome actually shifts to look like a baby microbiome. She gets higher levels of what I call baby bacteria. These are also yogurt bacteria, lactobacillus and bifidobacterium in her gut. And so there are other next generation probiotics out on the market like butyrate producers and Akkermansia. But I said during my pregnancy, no, I want those baby bacteria. So I went back to sort of the traditional lactobacillus and bifidobacterium probiotics. And then during breastfeeding, again, just trying to make sure that I'm eating well and trying to support my health. And thinking about, trying to get enough sleep, which is challenging as a new mom.
And then the very fascinating aspect of breastfeeding
and
the microbiome. Mm-hmm. And there, again, a two-way street, because if the mother is physically breastfeeding, of course, a lot of women pump as well, aren't there essentially sensors on the human breast that picks up what's in the baby's microbiome?
Yeah, so there are some studies that suggest that the mom can kind of respond to the baby, and if she senses inflammation, she can kind of send out different signals. We know that the breast milk contains many different components to feed an infant's gut microbiome. So, for example, it contains what's called HMOs, human milk oligosaccharides, and that feeds the probiotic bacteria in the gut, like bifidobacterium and lactobacillus. But I think what's even more wild is the microbes actually colonize the milk ducts, and the mom will start making their own sort of probiotics to feed back to the baby. And so there's just this interchange to help support infant microbiome development.
Yeah, the human body is so amazing. And I have a sister who is a surgeon and has 2 young children. And she has been sending me a lot of the research, of course, on breastfeeding. And what's fascinating to me, too, that's changed since when I was a mother, I'm 52, so my children are now going off to college, was that now, because the breast milk is different, I mean, it kind of makes total sense, but essentially the breast milk you produce in the morning is much different than the breast milk you produce at the end of the day. And so for many mothers now who are familiar with this research, they label the breast milk so that you're only using the breast milk that you pumped in the morning to feed the baby in the morning, or the breast milk that you pumped at night to feed the baby at night. What would be different about what's in that breast milk from different times of the day?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that is different is just the hormones that make you sleep. And the things that a new mom wants most of all is for their baby to sleep at night. And
yes,
so
I remember that.
So for example, there's higher levels in melatonin, the sleep hormone, in the late night milk. So, and then there's higher levels of cortisol, the awake hormone, in AM milk. And so the thought is if you separate that, you might be able to get your baby to sleep better. But another thing I think that's really interesting is how the milk changes in composition over time. So it increases in calories as the infant grows up, so that you can feed your baby more. And levels of particular nutrients also change over time. And that may have a big effect on the gut microbiome.
It's just incredible. It's just incredible. And you are so brilliant on all of this and make it so understandable for all of us. I want to talk about the biggest innovations that are out there right now. And we talked a little bit about it already. But because of the rise in these GLP-1s, Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, others, forgive me if I'm forgetting, some that are out there that people are using, what do we know now about how those GLP-1s are influencing the gut microbiome and thus our larger health?
We know that the GLP-1s can affect the gut microbiome because they can act on the gut barrier and change some of the immune interactions. And they do see shifts in the gut microbiome on people on GLP-1s. We also know that GLP-1s can have a direct effect on the brain. So we're really interested in this interaction between the gut microbiome, metabolism, and brain health. And particularly in Alzheimer's disease, we think about Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. We know there's really altered insulin signaling. And so these
Alzheimer's is like type 3.
It's like type 3 diabetes. And so the GLP-1s might have a direct protective effect in preventing Alzheimer's disease. Now, in late stage, it doesn't seem to have an effect, and it may be too late of an intervention there. But there may be a pathway for disease prevention very, very early on.
And you mentioned the study of essentially what these GLP-1s like Ozempic and Wegovy are doing in terms of with Alzheimer's. What other kinds of brain diseases has there been study about or connections? I mean, I'm thinking of when people say, they're less addictive in terms of gambling or drinking or smoking.
And I think that's something that's really interesting about digestive hormones and mood and behavior, right? So we know that the GLP-1s can affect our brain and can actually activate our reward center. And they suppress appetite by basically saying, I'm already good, I'm fine. And so this same pathway happens in helping to prevent addiction. So rather than needing, gambling or a substance to sort of activate that reward, then the GLP-1s can activate the reward. And I think that really just shows how powerful digestive hormones are at regulating mood.
Yeah, when you heard that GLP-1 could help people with addictions, gambling, drinking, smoking. Did it surprise you?
So it all kind of made sense based on what we know, in sort of just saying, again, activating that center in the brain to say, I'm sated, I'm full, I'm good. That kind of, again, helps. A lot of those same pathways all feed into one area: overeating, gambling, substance abuse, that can all have very similar behavioral pathways.
Mm-hmm. What do we know about inflammation in the gut and these neurologic diseases?
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question to ask. So when we think about the gut microbiome and how it could affect different neurologic diseases, a primary pathway is through gut inflammation. And it turns out the diseases have different signatures. So let's start with Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is one of those diseases with the most evidence that the gut microbiome is involved.
In Parkinson's, that it may start in the gut?
It may start in the gut. So what's really interesting is that constipation symptoms can precede Parkinson's onset by 20 years. Second, we know that alpha-synuclein, this misfolded protein that causes Parkinson's disease, sometimes can start in the gut and spread up the vagus nerve. And epidemiologic studies have shown that if you cut the vagus nerve, some people have had to get a truncal vagus nerve vagotomy, it can reduce the risk of Parkinson's disease. And then the third thing is that Parkinson's patients have a gut inflammatory signature that looks like IBD, like inflammatory bowel disease. And it's got this overabundance of these proteins called lipocalin and calprotectin, which are a breakdown product from a very specialized immune cell.
This is so fascinating that they're looking into this with Parkinson's. So do you believe that preventing Parkinson's, that the answers may lie in the gut microbiome?
I think partially that could be true. One of the things that we understand about Parkinson's is that oftentimes there's a genetic risk plus an environmental risk on top of it. We know that there are many pathways to Parkinson's, so there are other environmental toxicants that can lead to this. We think the gut microbiome is a really important pathway there, and it's important for us to start screening this.
Mm-hmm. We have a segment of this podcast called Group Chat. We have solicited questions from many of our viewers because they want to learn from you, the expert in this field. So Pamela from Phoenix, Arizona asks, does sugar negatively impact the brain, contributing to Alzheimer's or forms of dementia?
Yeah, and so sugar, again, having insulin resistance seems to play into Alzheimer's disease. Sugar and then simple carbohydrates can have this negative impact. One of the studies that we were involved in was looking at calorie restriction in Alzheimer's disease. And so this was a great collaboration with my friend Marissa Schaefer. And what she looked at is if she cut 30% calories, but just in carbs, could that protect the brain from Alzheimer's disease? And the answer was yes, but only in females.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it changed the brain specifically in females. And then I started working with her and I asked, well, could we find, is this partially linked to the gut microbiome? Because maybe we don't all want to cut out 30% of calories and kind of be hangry the rest of our life. So then when we looked in the gut, when we cut 30% calories by carbohydrate, we slowed signs of microbiome aging. And we prevented this age-related increase in a bacteria called Bacteroides that we find can actually go and impair immune responses in Alzheimer's disease. So sugar can probably have two effects. One, it could have an effect on the brain, but two, it could have an effect on the gut microbiome and allow sort of the overgrowth of some of these bad bugs in aging.
Fascinating. Phyllis from Enterprise, Alabama asks, are there any foods proven to help with memory?
Oh, that's a really great question. So I think instead of specific foods, it's really thinking about an entire diet. I think the best evidence is with this Mediterranean modified diet. Mm-hmm. Again, it's rich in polyphenols coming from the olive oil and high fiber,
and blueberries,
omega-3, complex carbs.
Like in salmon or avocado.
Exactly. So thinking about a full, complete diet really focused on unsaturated fats and good nutrient sources.
Rebecca from Norman, Oklahoma wants to know about supplement blends that are advertised online. What do you think is worthwhile? what should people avoid?
That's a really good question because the supplement field isn't very regulated. So
Or regulated at all.
Yeah, no, that is correct. It is not regulated at all. And so some of the things to think about is you got to get enough fiber. Can you get it through your vegetables and your regular diet? If so, that's great. You don't need to supplement it. If you can't, maybe think about a fiber supplement. But I always recommend to people, don't go from 0 to your recommended 25 grams a day. Your stomach will feel very, very upset if you move that quickly.
But I think this is so interesting, Dr. Cox, because there is a billion, if not trillion-dollar industry now behind supplements. And we are being advertised online, as Rebecca mentions, that all of these things can help us with memory or mood or all of these things. The first thing you mentioned was fiber.
That's right. Well, certainly thinking about microbiome health.
Yeah.
If you can support your microbiome can make many of these things. So one is fiber. Two is things with antioxidant properties. Again, you can sometimes get them through your food. You can think about different supplements. I don't have a particular one to recommend.
But you do like probiotic supplements. So tell us which ones you think are worthwhile.
Sure, absolutely. So first I'll say I don't recommend any specific brand, but I'll talk about 3 classes of probiotics, okay? So first we have our yogurt bacteria or our baby bacteria. And these are really well-studied, very safe. And what happened about 125 years ago, somebody noticed that people living in Bulgaria lived longer. And they said, why? Why is this happening? And it was because they were eating yogurt. And so
I eat yogurt a lot.
so eating yogurt is great, but if you really want to boost your gut and if you want to get even higher levels, then you can take these bacteria as probiotics. And many of these are called lactobacillus or bifidobacterium. Now, these have many different health effects. Many of them are sort of interchangeable. Some of them are good for everybody. Some of them are not good for everybody. So, for example, there's a bacteria called Lactobacillus GG. And it bites, it hooks right into the gut, okay? This is really good at distracting the immune system and preventing milk allergy in kids. That same function, if it bites into the gut and if it interacts with the immune system, it's really bad for IBD, Crohn's, and colitis.
Yeah.
So thinking about which probiotic for which person is important. So that's sort of probiotics class 1, and then that we've had for 125 years. And then the next groups of probiotics that we have today are these butyrate-producing probiotics and then Akkermansia. And both of these have been shown to sort of improve gut barrier fortification and regulate metabolism, regulate brain health. And there was even a study that showed that combining butyrate producers, bifidobacterium, and Akkermansia boosted GLP-1 levels in type 2 diabetic patients. And so we see this really strong connection there.
This was actually a popular question from many of our listeners. Does eating well for your gut microbiome have to be expensive? What are some inexpensive ways to eat better?
I think this is such an important question and really addresses public health policy, food deserts, and how do we feed the microbiome in a cost-efficient manner. To make it simple, buy a head of broccoli, cook it with your food. Try to buy the less expensive vegetables that are out there. Try to get more vegetables in the diet as a way to support the gut microbiome. Yeah. But unfortunately, sometimes the most inexpensive and quick to get, not out of your way foods are not always the best for the gut microbiome.
Right. What you are saying is that ultra-processed foods, which are quick to grab off a shelf and perhaps put in the microwave, are not necessarily the best for your gut microbiome.
That's right. So what happens is that we pull out all the nutrients, and then most of your microbes live in your lower gut, and they're a little bit starved for foods.
In my experience, in going to the grocery store, things like broccoli, bananas, potatoes are relatively inexpensive. Now, blueberries and berries and other high polyphenol can be more expensive, certainly. But I notice even if the blueberries are like $6 for a carton, when I look at the receipts and then I go and buy some cereals, made that are popular with my children or teenagers, those are more expensive than that. And that doesn't mean I'm not cutting those out, but I'm just saying you make a choice about what you spend your money on. And fiber-rich vegetables are what's going to make and everything is in balance, but those are the ones it's worth spending the money on.
Exactly. And then there's some of the seeds like flax seeds and chia seeds where a little bit goes a long way. And so you can get a big bag of it and then sprinkle a little bit on your food, or even just, bring it up to solution in water, make a little gel out of it.
Okay, I was just going to ask you about that. I've been eating chia seeds for, I don't know, a dozen years now. I started with eating always flax. I always did flax. Then, of course, the chia seeds because of the omega-3s and for the fiber. And a lot of times I'll just also put them in my shake. But now I've been reading lately that you're supposed to let them soak for a little while to produce that gel. Like, what is that? Do I need to be doing that?
So it can be helpful just for your digestion. So chia seeds are really hungry for water. And so what can happen is if you have a big chunk of chia seeds and then they get into your gut and they start making the gel in your gut, they might sort of take out all the water, and you might actually end up to be more constipated instead of less.
Oh, I don't have that problem.
Okay. Because you have a healthy diet anyways. And then just while we're talking about different types of fiber.
Here's the People magazine headline: Norah reveals she's not constipated because of chia seeds.
But one of the ways that I like to think about fibers is, are they swellable? So chia seeds swell up. Oatmeal swells up.
And that's why those are good for you, because then they swell up in your intestines and it's happy.
Exactly. And so the swellable fibers also tend to lower cholesterol.
Yes.
So that's something to think about too. So, do you have a swellable fiber? Are you eating your oatmeal? Are you eating your chia seeds? Those can be really helpful.
Yes, doctor. I had oatmeal this morning. I don't always, but I did. I didn't have chia seeds because I'm traveling, but I did eat my oatmeal because my cholesterol has been up. And I mean, that is one thing people say. Someone very close to me, a woman in her 70s, had high cholesterol, started eating oatmeal every day, and literally lowered it within months. I mean, it's an amazing, oatmeal is amazing.
That's fantastic. And then finally, just to bring it back to the microbiome, we talk about fiber is nature's broom. It's the microbiome. So what happens is
fiber is nature's broom. Love it. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
So I think we've heard of that saying before, but what actually happens is the microbes ferment that fiber into short-chain fatty acids. Those short-chain fatty acids feed the gut. They literally trigger the muscle cells in your gut. And so it's the microbial products that actually trigger all that healthy gut movement.
Gut movement, you mean so that you're not constipated?
Yes, exactly.
Dr. Cox. See, I got this. I got this. All right, another one. This is a question we got a number of times. Is mushroom coffee good for you? I've never even heard of that.
Oh, actually, this is something that got sent to me by one of my family members. So I have to look up. I'm trying to remember the sugar that's in mushrooms. And so when I say sugar, so there's glucose and fructose. It's not that. But there are more complex carbohydrates. And there are specific ones. I don't remember if it's trehalose or chitosan or some of these other complex carbs. But that's also can be good for the microbiome. You can have it as mushroom coffee, but you could also just eat mushrooms. They're both good.
Okay, great. Vandy from Deming, New Mexico asks, can you counteract the harmful effects of eating ice cream and cake with something else? Within how many hours, like the same day or next day?
I think that's a really important question. And so certainly we think about, moderation, right? And then also personalized risk, right? So first off, you got to take a real honest assessment. Where is your, insulin or HbA1c levels? Do you already struggle with insulin signaling or not? If you're sort of in the healthy range, you can have a slice of cake. That's fine. You can exercise. And then you can also, again, think about adding on these fiber compounds that can help regulate glucose levels.
And can I make a suggestion on that too? Because I think there's some emerging thought, I don't know how much scientific data is behind it, emerging thought too, that if you are going to eat something that is insulin producing, like cake or heavy insulin producing, a lot of sugar in it, with cake or ice cream, if you take a walk after a dinner with that can be helpful, right?
Absolutely. So burning off some of that sugar is really helpful. And then again, going back to some of these studies where there was no dietary intervention, but there was a probiotic intervention that had all three classes of probiotics. It had the bifidobacterium, it had the butyrate producers, it had the Akkermansia, and that lowered HbA1c and boosted GLP-1. So there may be some probiotics that could help with that.
Dr. Cox, one of our goals is to give people healthful tips.
3 Simple Things is sponsored by United Health Group, working to close the women's health gap.
I'm hoping you could give us 3 simple things, perhaps, to do in the morning when we wake up.
So I would say thinking about the gut microbiome is think about ways to feed your microbiome. And so that would be with the fiber. So this could be oatmeal. This could be chia seeds. We could think about tuning the microbiome with polyphenols. You could add some sort of dried cranberries into that oatmeal. And third is to move. We actually know that exercise can also help select for a healthy gut microbiome. And so making sure you have enough movement in the day could be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Those are all excellent tips. All right, now the part of this podcast where we turn the tables. So it's my understanding you have some questions for me.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And I'm so excited to be on this podcast today. And so, I know that you're fascinated by the gut microbiome. So I wanted to find out, how did you first hear about it? How did you first get into the gut microbiome?
I probably heard about the gut microbiome 3 decades ago. My mom has been talking about this for forever. Went to medical school, is, I think, probably a frustrated nutritionist, at heart. And always made me believe that, food is medicine. And also that, whenever I was feeling down or depressed, my mom would say, eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and take a nap. So I don't know what that did for my microbiome, but the idea that, have something to satiate you and take a rest and stuff and calm essentially your central nervous system, that you can do that by making yourself feel full in your gut and taking a rest, and that could, of course, change your whole mood. So I think just, from my own mother, learning about, the gut microbiome, and then just as a result, reading so much about it. And then actually, I read so much historical fiction. And actually in Ken Follett's books, he talked about so much too, people using spices and herbs to treat disease in the past. And while I haven't done a lot of research in that idea just fascinates me. And of course, Eastern medicine used so much of that. So just the idea of using nature as a way to cure our ills, I just think there's a lot to learn and be unlocked there.
I think that's such a great point. And again, it speaks to how we've grown up with our microbes our whole life, our whole human history. And I guess my other question for you is now, as you learn about the gut microbiome, is there anything that you do differently in your lifestyle to support your microbiome?
I do. And, my sister is a colorectal surgeon, and so she focuses so much on fiber. And I just think it's interesting because in this current health craze, everybody's focused on protein. But in some ways, too, we really need to be focused on fiber in terms of not only just health, but cancer prevention. So actually, some of the things I've changed in my own diet, now when I wake up in the morning, I eat 2 prunes, just actual, organic prunes. Just because they're like sugar, they're like candy.
They're super tasty. Yeah. So that was one thing I did do differently during my pregnancy. I ate prunes.
Yeah. So I try and eat prunes. I have a full drawer of chia seeds and flax seeds. They have brain booster mixes that you can get, at the grocery store that also have some hemp seeds in there. So I do that. If I'm not making a smoothie, I have yogurt with pumpkin seeds and walnuts and bananas that I put some honey on. All of these things that I think are yummy and tasty, but I know, and I've just read, can help you. And then I just think one thing that I've always learned, from my mother is eat the rainbow, and that makes your gut microbiome, happy. So I do anytime if I'm at a buffet or, someplace, I try and eat lots of different things that I don't normally have, like fruits and vegetables, because we're not all keeping like a gazillion types of vegetables at our house. You just can't. So I try, and when I go out, to try different things that I wouldn't normally have at home.
Well, I think you must have a really happy microbiome. It sounds like it's really well supported.
I know. I kind of want to test it.
That's great.
I kind of want to test it. And that makes me think of, when people say, what do you eat? And I think for the most part, I'm healthy. I do drink alcohol. So I wonder what the alcohol does to the microbiome.
Yeah, so that's a really good question as well. So there is a shift in the gut microbiome, but I think it can really adapt to it, and I think things in moderation are just fine. There are other things that can happen with too much alcohol over too long periods of time. It can change circulation. It can change immunity. It can change metabolism.
People say it causes leaky gut.
Yeah, exactly. And so again, it's all about things in moderation.
I say that a lot. It's all about moderation. Exactly. Okay, myth busting. Obviously, the internet is full of a lot of myths. And that's, again, part of the reason we wanted to do this podcast is to try and perhaps shed some light on what out there is not true. So let me run you through a few of these things and tell us if they're good or bad for our guts. The protein craze.
Okay, so the protein craze. So I think protein is really important for supporting your health, your energy needs. Ensure the microbiome needs protein, but not at the expense of cutting fiber and vegetables. So if you're on sort of the all bacon, all hamburger patty diet, your microbiome is maybe going to be a little bit off because, again, we need these fermented products happening in our gut.
Mm-hmm. Taking a shot of olive oil in the morning.
Oh, that's very interesting. So I haven't actually heard of that one.
Well, apparently the young people that I work with say it's very popular on the internet.
Okay. So, I mean, I think I would rather have olive oil, poured over some tomatoes with a little basil, and I might enjoy it a little bit better that way.
Or cook your eggs in it in the morning or something,
exactly.
Rather than a shot of it.
So I think what it brings up is the type of fats are really important. So we got away from fats. We called fats really bad for a long period of time, and that wasn't accurate. There are definitely good fats. So olive oil is this unsaturated fat that might help support brain health. In addition, apparently even some of the saturated fats could be good for brain health. The brain is an organ that is full of fat. You need the fats for brain health. As it's emerging, some new studies by my colleagues have found that coconut oil might be good for Parkinson's disease. And so that's not saying to don't eat a spoonful of coconut oil, but maybe start to cook some of your vegetables in coconut oil as a way to get that other type of healthy fat species into the brain.
Red meat, good or bad for our gut?
Yeah, so red meat, it gets a lot of bad rap. And one of the things that we talk about red meat causing heart disease. Well, as it turns out, the microbiome can regulate that. There's choline in red meat. The microbiome can turn that into trimethylamine, and then that gets converted into trimethylamine oxide, TMAO. That's the thing that causes plaques that build up in the arteries. But then the really fascinating thing is people have now found elevated TMAO even in Alzheimer's disease. So basically, if you eat red meat and you get sort of this reaction, if we could find the microbial enzyme that pushes it this way, or even better, we found some probiotics that in a test tube can deplete TMAO. Could we reverse that, and could we make red meat healthier along with the probiotics? So that's our hope. Again, in moderation, I think it's fine. I don't think you have to completely swear off red meat, but understanding the microbiome might provide some really important answers. Not everybody's going to react to a steak in exactly the same way, and maybe the secret lies in the gut.
Mm-hmm. Prebiotic sodas, are those good or bad for the gut?
Yeah. So again, a prebiotic soda. So this has got some of this. First, what is a prebiotic? Let's start there. A prebiotic is the thing that boosts the microbiome. This is like a fiber in a powder. And so I think, certainly having that extra boost of fiber coming into your diet, that might be a great way to get it. It's all about what's accessible, what fits in your daily life. Maybe you're on the go and you don't have time to go saute some vegetables, right? So I think that's a great way to get fiber as well.
What about these probiotic teas? Those have become popular. Are those good for the gut?
So I have seen this on the shelf in grocery stores, and this one always kind of makes me laugh. This is a complete myth. If you take bacteria and you put it in boiling water, you're going to kill the microbes. You're going to kill the probiotics. And so there's going to be nothing left there. So go ahead and save your money on probiotic teas where you're going to put in boiling water.
Got it. And we talked about alcohol, but good or bad for the gut?
Again, in moderation, I think it's fine, but in excess, it can cause some of the problems in the leaky gut.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Laura Cox, we're going to get so many additional questions from this conversation, and I can't thank you enough. You've taught me so much, and I'm excited about the idea that what you're studying and other microbiologists could lead to the prevention and treatment of many of these neurologic diseases like MS, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's that affect so many of our family members. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and it was really a delight to talk with you about this. Thank you.
Thank you.